Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all. It's great to see so many people joining. Please do put your name and where you're listening from in the chat. It'll be good to see where everyone's from. So the recording will be available after the session, and we'll send it in an email after the event as well. As we go along, please do put your comments, questions in the chat, and we'll get to those after the presentation. And if we don't get time afterwards, we will make sure that we follow up with an email as well. So let's begin. So today's presentation is on building sibling interactions. So in general, sibling relationships are always unique. They will always have a very unique relationship, but that's usually understood by the siblings. Having relationships with the siblings is very important for the emotional and mental health of all involved. So this involves parents and the siblings as well. And having an autism diagnosis isn't a barrier to having a meaningful relationship. So that shouldn't be used as a reason why relationships aren't being formed. And remember that relationships are very unique. They're very different. So every relationship has its own meaning and its own way of expressing itself. However, some relationships do need a bit of encouragement to grow. So we will talk about how do we encourage that growth as well throughout this presentation. So we know that sometimes sibling interactions can be difficult. So this is not exclusive to autistic siblings. This is across the board with non-autistic siblings as well. Some of the difficulties can be around not having common interests. So them not having the same interests and not knowing how to interact with each other. Another point could be them feeling left out. So the non-autistic sibling feeling left out of decisions, feeling left out by their parents, because naturally more attention shifts to the autistic sibling because they might need a bit more support. The non-autistic sibling can also feel an increased responsibility. So we might be asking the non-autistic siblings to do a few chores or to get a few things for the autistic sibling, and they might feel that increased responsibility and start to feel a bit resentful or not happy about the situation. Another reason why sibling interactions can be difficult is because the non-autistic sibling might be feeling a bit embarrassed about their autistic sibling. Why they not like my friends? Why are they not playing with me? Why do they do this in public, or why do they do that at home? So sometimes there's a lot of misunderstanding what's going on as well. So what can parents do? So the first thing I would always encourage parents to do is to have that conversation with a non-autistic sibling. Create a safe space where they can speak to you about all these things that might be going through their minds that they don't know how to understand or express themselves. This can be at home. This could be, a special time that just you and that non-autistic sibling have. It could be in an ice cream shop, something like that, that they can have that space to ask you any question, whether they feel it's silly or not, without any repercussions or without feeling like, they're not allowed to ask those questions. Make sure that there are no interruptions as well. So we want good one-to-one quality time with that non-autistic sibling and the parent, where they don't feel like they're being rushed, or they don't feel like they are being a nuisance, or they're interrupting the parent's flow. And try and explain what autism is in their own words, in words in which they can understand themselves. So this might be something simple as your autistic sibling just sees the world a bit differently. They understand and the world differently as well. So some of the actions and some of the things that they do might be different, but different doesn't mean it's wrong or it's something that's bad. It just means that you guys are not, you don't see certain things the same way, and that's absolutely fine. And talk about what does autism mean for the particular autistic sibling. So how does autism present themselves in that sibling as well? And another question that you could also ask is, how do they understand autism? Just so you can get you can understand how they see it from their point of view, the non-autistic siblings' point of view. How do you see autism? How do you see your sibling? What are some of the things that how would you explain that to another peer if they were to ask questions? And it gives you a little bit of an insight into how they're thinking and how they're processing as well. Another thing that parents can do is to think about that parent-child interaction as well. So these are times when the non-autistic sibling might feel that they're being treated differently. So how are the interactions between the parent and the autistic child coming off to the non-autistic child? So just making sure you're giving explanations about why you're having to support the autistic sibling to do certain things. A lot of things can be misunderstood by non-autistic siblings as well. So just making sure you're explaining in as much detail as they can understand why the autistic sibling might need some extra support from you. And get them involved as well. Get them involved in helping, get them involved in creating a good space for the autistic sibling, but only if they want to. So we don't want to force those interactions or force the non-autistic sibling to help. But what we do want is give them the choice to say, I do want to help, and also give them the escape to say, I don't want to help in this moment. And that should be absolutely fine. I know sometimes it can be frustrating for a parent who you might need some extra hands to help, but we also don't want it to seem as if it's a burden on the non-autistic sibling. And get them involved in decisions that are being made in the family around general family stuff, but also around the autistic siblings, because they can give a unique insight into how to support their autistic sibling. They, are most likely closer in age, so they're able to see different things and see how they interact. So they might just give you a different perspective into how to support. So how do we go about creating those interactions between the autistic sibling and the non-autistic siblings? So we always have to make sure that we may have to actively create those sibling interactions. They might not organically form. So as parents and carers, you might have to actively put in a little bit of work to make sure those interactions are forming. So this can be in engaging in similar activities. It's a very good way to start. So if they both like bubbles, for example, or they both like going outside to the park, taking them both to the park at the same time so they can enjoy the same activities and they can see each other enjoying the same activities as well. Some autistic siblings might find it challenging to play appropriately, with the specific toys, especially when they're playing with their non-autistic sibling. Might find it difficult to stay on task. So if they were playing like a board game, for example, or a puzzle, and then the autistic sibling goes off task or just decides to leave, it might be a bit frustrating for the non-autistic sibling. Grabbing preferred toys and not asking or not sharing toys or activities or different things, food as well. And they can also find it difficult interacting with games or activities. And some of the interactions might be inappropriate or in a very rigid way in which maybe the non-autistic sibling doesn't want to engage in those activities in that way. So how do we do this? How do we start creating those interactions? So we want to start small. We want to start with very small increments, whether that's in duration or whether that's in the number of steps in their autistic sibling and the non-autistic sibling is engaging in that activity. So like we mentioned before, find an activity they're both interested in. So for example, if it's board games, for example, you want to start maybe in small steps. So maybe it's the parent and the non-autistic sibling engaging in that board game, where the autistic sibling might be rolling the dice for the non-autistic sibling or the parent. Where so they're still engaged, you're still creating those interactions, and you're starting off really small, and then you want to build it up. So if it's through durations as well, you can start with seconds as durations, and you slowly increase the time that they're engaging in those activities together. You also want to start at a level that everyone can be successful. We don't want it to be too difficult for one child over the other child. We want it to be as difficult, oh no, sorry, as easy, so that both siblings can be successful at it. And the most important thing is just to make sure they're all having fun and they're all motivated to stay there. If you have fun and they're motivated, they're more likely to create that rapport and more likely to want to stay in the activity and not want to see as a chore or something they have to do. Sometimes you might need to plan the session a bit more to ensure that everyone's happy throughout the session. So in the beginning, you might have to put down some pen to paper and write down everything that you might need in this activity before the activity starts. This is looking at the various materials that you might need. This is looking at the different resources that each siblings might use as well. So if you take the example of making cookies, thinking about things like what does each sibling enjoy doing? So if one sibling enjoys rolling, another sibling enjoys, I don't know, sprinkling flour, things like that, or measuring out things, putting things in cups, then you can divide it that way so that everyone's doing things that they enjoy, but then when we put it all together, it's creating that whole activity of making cookies. Thinking about what resources should you have ready. So we want to make sure that the resources are readily available. So when we're off, looking for those resources, it doesn't put too much of a delay in the activity so that one sibling has a chance to kind of be a bit bored and walk off. Thinking about whether you need two different stations or they can share together. So you guys would know, as parents or carers or professionals, you would know how the interaction is already. So if they need two separate stations with their separate things, that's fine. They're still in the same environment together. But if they're able to share and wait turns and things like that, then that's great as well. We can use that as well. Think about what are they going to be doing whilst they're waiting, if there's waiting involved as well. So with cookies, maybe the adult is kneading at that time, or maybe it's in the oven. So what other things can you do whilst they're waiting? So you can do things like you have a break, they can have a break whilst they're waiting, or you can put another easy, simple activity in that waiting time. And think about, do you need to support their communication? Do you need to support their understanding? Things like visuals, things like that. Do you need to incorporate that in the activity as well so that both autistic siblings and non-autistic siblings can understand and participate meaningfully? Another way of creating that interaction is building rapport between the siblings. So sometimes this helps with naturally occurring activities. So by building rapport, they would naturally like to be around each other. So we always want to encourage interactions with the non-autistic siblings, and make sure that maybe the non-autistic sibling is giving the autistic siblings their favorite stuff, without there being any demand or questions associated with it. So there's no, if I give you this, you give me that, or if I give you this, you need to go get me something from the toilet, things like that. It's just them offering free stuff. So whether it's, they grab 2 cookies and then they just give the autistic sibling another cookie just for free, with no demands associated with it. And it can also work the other way as well, where the autistic sibling, is giving the non-autistic sibling things like that, like, I don't know, sneaking an extra ice cream and giving it to them whilst they're watching TV. And at this point, when we see that building rapport is very important, we don't want there to be any expectation to share at that point. We're just simply working on them enjoying each other, enjoying each other's company. Sharing is a different thing after that, which we can work on. But if we feel like we just want to start by building that rapport, there should be no expectations to share. If it comes organically, that's great. But if not, we want to just make sure that that good feeling and building rapport is being done. Communication is very important as well. So we also want to ensure that the siblings are able to communicate with each other, especially if they have different communication methods. So the non-autistic child understands how the autistic child communicates and vice versa, just to make sure that communication is clear between them. You can use things like communication boards or communication books to help them understand each other. And just also consider the expressive language and receptive language. So when we're talking about expressive language, we're talking about the way they speak, they communicate, they express what their needs and their wants. And receptive language is how much they understand. Sometimes they're not always on the same level. So just making sure that they're communicating to each other's level for receptive language and their expressive language. And also teaching them how to communicate when they don't want to be there, when they don't want to engage in that activity, because you want to make sure that they're, again, happy and motivated to stay. And social stories are a very good way of communicating why interactions with their siblings is important. And this can be used for both the autistic sibling and the non-autistic sibling. Another way to get them engaged is giving them choice in the activities that they're engaging in. So this could be either the siblings deciding between themselves what activity they're going to do first and then next, or they could take turns in choosing the activities if they don't particularly love the same activities. And a choice board or now and next board is a very good way to visually present that to both siblings. So there is a constant reminder about what's happening and whose turn it is. Another way is to teach them how to take turns, teach them how to share. So we want to encourage this as much as possible. And a way in which we can do that is through these couple of steps. So the first one would be to ensure that they're in close proximity to each other and they're engaging in a motivating activity for both of them. And close proximity can be right next to each other, can be sharing the same table, or it can be being in the same room. It really depends on where you're starting from and where you want to go. Giving them lots of specific praise. So, and how they're engaged in the activity. So if you're doing a painting, for example, just saying, oh, I love the way you're painting the house, or I love the way you are mixing the colors together. So that's specific praise instead of good job, oh, well done. Encourage them to share. So try and start to build that sharing skill. So this could be, oh, could you give this person a turn? Can they have a turn with the red paint? Or can this person have some red paint? And just simply giving it to them, not when they're using the red paint, but maybe the red paint is a bit closer to them, so they can just hand that over to their sibling. Again, start off with short durations. Just make sure that it's short, fun, and motivating, and you can slowly build up that time as well. And then always continue to give that specific praise for encouragement and engagement. Just keep them engaged and keep telling them that they're doing a good job when you see those positive behaviors. And sometimes it will building their rapport to engaging in those turn-taking activities naturally you might naturally see those interactions occurring, but also sometimes we want to make sure we're encouraging those natural interactions from occurring as well. So you might have to begin to fade yourself out from the activities. So if you're always around when those activities are taking place, start to think about removing yourself from that situation. So this could be you just set up the activity, you begin the activity with them, and then you slowly pull yourself. So you might say, okay, give me a second, I'll be right back, and maybe take 5 seconds out or 10 seconds out, and then slowly increase the amount of duration that you're away from the activity. Because what we do want to see is that they are engaging in that activity by themselves with each other. And then sometimes we can set up situations where interactions will naturally occur. So if we know that they both enjoy painting, for example, and maybe you're making dinner, maybe there's paints and paint resources on the dining table, and they come around and they see that, they might naturally pick up and engage in those activities, and you might naturally see them engaging in those painting activities as well. And again, we'll always emphasize this, continue to give them specific social praise for that engagement, for what they're doing as well. Also remember that, sibling relationships evolve over time. So there's no timeline or time limit on how to do this or how long it should take for them to get in that good space. So try not to force the relationships before each sibling is ready. So sometimes one sibling might be ready and the other one might not be. So just working on maybe that specific sibling first, and then trying to get them both together. Encourage both siblings, the autistic sibling and the non-autistic sibling, to have their own interests and hobbies outside of each other, because this will give them a space to be themselves, a space that is just for them as well. Encourage them to be a bit more independent as well. Ensure that you're scheduling that one-to-one quality time, like we mentioned in the beginning, with each siblings, where they can have quality time with a parent or both parents at the same time. And you can talk about different things, not only about the autistic sibling, but talk about their specific interests. Do something that they love, do something that they want to do with you as well. So it's not always, again, having that quality time, no interruptions. And highlight the positives of each sibling. So celebrate achievements together as a family. So this could be celebrating the autistic siblings' achievements, saying a well done to them in front of everyone, and doing the same for the non-autistic sibling in front of the autistic sibling, just so that they know that they're being seen and all their achievements are being acknowledged. And also, lastly, give the non-autistic sibling a choice in how they're involved in their sibling's care. So this is a very important point, because sometimes the non-autistic sibling might not feel like they have a choice in how much care and how much support they give their autistic siblings, especially if they were fine at first, and then they're kind of like, okay, this is a bit too much for me. Just always having a regular conversation, checking in with them that they're okay, and telling them that it's okay if they don't want to do something. I mean, it's absolutely fine. Nothing will change. And you guys will be able to handle it. There is a website called sibs.org.uk, sibs.org.uk, which helps non-autistic children or siblings of children with disabilities, to help them. It's a website for the kids themselves or for the non-autistic person, and as well as for the parents to support them. There's lots of resources on there, and they can become young carers if they want to as well, and feel a bit more empowered about that as well. So thanks for joining our session. Our next session is on autism and mental health, and we're looking at strategies and sources of support for that. And that will be on Friday, the 28th of June at 12:30. And this will be run by Carrie Caceres-Tagian and Emma Price, head of Tramhouse School. And if you have found this session useful and want to support us, creating more of these sessions in the future, please do consider leaving a donation by scanning the QR code on your screen, or following up, and we can follow the link on the below the QR code to donate as well. And we will put the link in the follow-up email as well if you're not able to scan the QR code. Thank you everyone for coming this time, and we hope to see you next month. I will answer some questions at the moment. So we have one question: why is my autistic child more impatient, not reciprocal to her sister, but is to us as her parents? She takes out her frustrations on her sister. So this can be seen as well. As we mentioned before, remember that this is normal sibling interactions as well. But sometimes when we spoke about that building rapport, maybe the sister hasn't spent that time to build up that rapport a lot with the autistic child. So maybe going back to that and making sure that you're building that rapport together as well, to make sure that they understand each other, that the sibling is not a hindrance, is not just an extra person. There's worth to having a sister. Your sister is fun, your sister gives you free stuff, your sister does fun stuff with you as well. And just building on those interactions as well might help the autistic child understand and be a little bit more patient and understanding of their sister. Another question that's come in is, I wanted to know if all your children are potentially autistic. Do the same things apply that has been said today? Yes. So if all your children, sorry, it took me a while to understand the question. If all your children are autistic, the same thing applies as well. Just making sure they have their own unique, different hobbies and interests. Those are being looked after, and those are being acknowledged as well. Making sure they have one-on-one time, but also making sure that you're building those interactions. Granted, some of those interactions might take a bit longer, especially in finding the common interests and things like that. And they might have a bit more challenges in engaging in them, but you can use all those that apply here as well. Definitely working on the communication, definitely working on building rapport, definitely working on building those interactions, making them engage in the same activities for a while. If all your children are autistic, what you might have to do a bit more is break down the activities into further smaller increments, so you're achieving little wins that accumulate to a bigger win as well. Another question that's come up in our private chat is, do you have any advice around siblings where there's a bigger age gap and there won't be as much natural play? Yes. So the theory around this would still work. However, thinking about the age gap, things like maybe we talk about a teenager versus a toddler or a primary school student, they might not organically have naturally occurring activities that they can do together. But what they can do is do that sharing, do those little things, watch, programs together, or engage in conversations with family time together as well. That's something you can do, whether it's sneaking cookies, one person tries to sneak cookies to each other, offering that help, giving them things, helping in that way as well. Because helping sometimes is a very good way to show that you care about someone if you're helping them constantly. There are ways that you can find some common interests. So if the teenager maybe likes to paint or likes to read and things like that, that's modeling that behavior for the younger sibling as well. So you can also encourage your younger sibling to maybe just go read in the same room with that person as well. Laugh about the same things like that. So although you might not see as obvious a common interest, there are little things that you can pick out from activities that they both like. So thank you once again for everyone that's come to see this session, and we hope to see you next month. Thank you and have a good day. Goodbye.